Reed, you got 6 minutes.
One shark to the next one. So I am Reed, I work at ClockShark, and we are an early stage tech company located here in Chico. And we build stuff. Specifically, we build software and apps that go on phones, which we think is pretty darn neat. But what's even cooler than that, in our opinion, is people who build stuff like this, and this, and this, because as cool as it is to see stuff like that and realize this is the kind of things that we can achieve as human beings. We can build stuff like this, we can make airplanes. It's just something that I think is really incredible and speaks mountains and volumes about the ingenuity and innovation and the hard work that we as a species have out there. But what's even cooler than that, in my opinion, is guys who actually do this stuff, who actually go out there and build this stuff every day, because those guys are just badasses. I mean, we go to work every day at ClockShark and we try to get as much done as we possibly can and work hard, but you know what, we get to sit down and we get to do it in an air-conditioned office, and you know, as hard as we'd like to think that we work, it's probably a little bit easier than these guys, because these guys are outside year-round in the elements, getting stuff done, building the roads that we drive on, the houses we live in, and the offices we work in. So these guys, in our opinion, are badasses, and they are our customers. So construction and field service companies is the target market that we serve, and we try to help them just make their jobs a little bit easier by building technology solutions and applications that just help them save money, save time, become more efficient, run their operations a little bit better, help them stay profitable. So like most other companies, they've got the same challenges as the rest of us. You know, are we profitable? Are we efficient as we can be? But the thing about construction and field service that's a little bit different than some other industries is the amount of management of human labor that's involved with it. You got guys going all over the place, multiple job sites they got to check in and check out of, make sure things keep moving. So the founder and CEO of our company, his name is Cliff Mitchell. He was running a construction company before starting ClockShark and ran into a lot of these different problems. And one of the big things that he came across that affects all of these areas is comprehensive time tracking and scheduling. You got to know where your guys are, what they're doing, if they're at the right job site, if you have additional people nearby, if you're running field service, an emergency call comes in, who's closest to deal with it. That kind of stuff makes a huge difference. And with all of the wonderful technology that we have on smartphones nowadays, you automatically get a bunch of other fun stuff too, like being able to pull the device time right off of the smartphone or the tablet, so they don't have to worry about typing extra stuff in, get you accurate down to the minute, you don't have overlapping time segments, and you get GPS locations so that you can see where people are, where they've been, if they were where they needed to be, all that kind of stuff done automatically, and then that gets sent up to the cloud where the administrative staff can kind of see what's going on and do job costing and all this other kind of stuff. So company's about 4 years old. After finding product market fit, it's been growing pretty well. So we all moved here. This picture was taken in February of 2017 at a company retreat that we had in San Diego. And then 6 months later, this picture was taken. A couple more folks up there. We've been hiring at about a person a month, which seems to be as fast as we can possibly do it. And since this picture was taken in Las Vegas a few months ago, we've added 4 more full-time employees and a few part-time interns as well. And we are still hiring. We need folks. We need more sharks. So we do keep up as much as we can working with Chico State, going to the job fairs and keeping up with the people, the heads of the departments that we're interested in, to try to see if we can get candidates out of there. And of course, we're participating in Grow Tech, which is an initiative, if you're unfamiliar with that, to try to raise the, what's the word for it?
Awareness.
Awareness, that's good. That there's a lot of tech happening here in Chico, and try to attract, get people to stay here, because I know there's a vibrant community, and be able to effectively recruit from out of the area so that people know, hey, if I'm going to come up from the Bay Area and take a job in Chico and it doesn't work out, am I in trouble? Or is there other places I can work? And if anybody in the room is in a tech company or surrounded by that stuff, I encourage you, Dr. Wendy, to get involved in that, because you'd be surprised how many tech companies there actually are here. So those are the things that we're doing, but we still need more sharks, and we need sharks now. So my ask, if there is one, is does anybody, if you've got any ideas on how we might do some recruiting here to find the sharks that are already here, that's great. If you have any ideas that I can take back to Grow Tech, to kind of let people know how can we attract more people here into Chico that we can use for recruitment into the tech space. So that is what I have.
What kind of employees are you looking for?
All of them. So UX design developers, front-end, mobile, and web developers, back-end, full-stack application kind of guys, engineers. We also have marketing positions open. We have customer support positions open, sales positions. Human resources specialist is something we're actively looking for because we kind of got to that tipping point where trying to have the CEO do everything plus human resources is becoming unsustainable. So those are, if you go to ClockShark.com, there's a careers page on the bottom of it that lists all of the positions that we have available at the moment. But a little bit of all of them.
Because I work with 7 community colleges, and we probably have people you're looking for in those colleges right now.
Fantastic.
So I'll contact you.
Cool, appreciate it.
I have some questions about the product itself. So separately, how does the tracking portion of it go? I know there's time tracking, but is there also, like, say, geotagging, so you know exactly what? Okay, that's. And then my next question had to do with materials. Besides tracking time, do you also track materials?
We do not.
Okay, is that something? Is that in a product plan somewhere? Or you don't want to get into that mess?
We're in discussions over it. I mean, there's a lot of room in time tracking, but we're always wondering, when is it the right time to either add that functionality to the product or create a separate product for it. And
Right.
the ideas are being kicked around.
My last question, since you hadn't picked time yet, my last question has to do with, does this also do push notification for the administrators? Or do they have to go in and pull? Okay, it does. Okay.
Yeah, it does file sharing between the web dashboard that administrators use and the employees on there. If you change something on the schedule and you push a button, it notifies everybody who was affected by that change, so they know right now, go look at the schedule, update. It'll do turn-by-turn directions to the next place on your schedule if you need to.
Okay.
And it does do the geo-tracking. Every clock punch includes a GPS location. There's also a feature to have the GPS check in 4 or 5 times an hour. We don't do continuous GPS tracking because that will destroy your battery.
Yeah.
So about 3 or 4 times an hour, it'll just ping back and say, hey, this is where it is. But that can be turned on and off depending on what the organization wants to do. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, comment, you should hire her. How are you funding your growth?
We are a bootstrapped company and all of it is self-funded.
Yay.
So bringing on average 1 person a month is not draining your cash flow?
Well, both because we're very, very picky on who we hire. I have to give a lot of credit to Cliff and Joe who started the company. They've been really careful about hiring. We've got all really, really great people, and it just takes a little bit of time. As anybody who's done recruiting knows, sometimes you have to live with the pain a little bit and stretch everybody a little bit thinner than to rush in and potentially make a bad hire. So somewhere between, that's about what it takes for us to get an applicant that we're happy with, but also with the growth that we have in the company, that's about how long it takes to be able to fund another salary. I mean, depending on the salary, but give or take. Yeah.
What's your staff?
What's that?
What's your staff?
Oh, I wish I could answer that question a little better. I know it is all .NET, and the mobile application stuff has just been moved to native because we finally got the staff to be able to have Android guys and iOS guys. So I know the back end and the web is all on .NET, running on Microsoft Azure, and then the mobile apps are both native, so iOS and Android developers, respectively. Yes?
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One, in a job shop situation where product goes through and has to follow a work order, and people have to time in and out to keep track of their time and materials, but the times, can it keep track of a job order as it goes through a shop, as well as the employee?
So the 2 criteria that are picked when clocking in or switching tasks is job and then task. So depending on how they set that up, it could be done so that if the job itself is the particular...
Has an invoice within it.
Yeah, and then as it goes through each of the stations, you could set those up as tasks. But usually it's depending on however your accounting system wants to set up for that, or however you do your job costing, and then we kind of work backwards from there. We'll either import that stuff. There's ADP integrations that we're working on now, and a handful of other ones are QuickBooks, because a lot of people, especially contractors and field service folks, are on QuickBooks. We'll just do whole imports from that and then map everything up so that it matches that way. But most of it, Yeah, it depends on the use case. Unfortunately, we've been around long enough and have enough customers that we've been able to find ways of, accommodating most of those things. The big thing that we've seen with warehouse kind of work is that you don't really need to clock in from your mobile phone because you're in the same location every single day. So that's one of the features that we're working on right now too, is just to be able to mount an iPad to the wall and have it operate like a kiosk, put in your PIN number, you're clocked in, and you can go do that shift. But if you need to track it throughout the different stations, you may either need several points to do that or to go back to the phones, but,
The second part of the question is, like, out in the field, do you have like any OSHA or safety things, like, hey, we're up on a roof, we don't have any safety gear, so either employees can say, hey, this isn't safe, put it in so it can be taken care of later, or?
No, there's not. We've looked at that and we've heard of that because there are other apps that will do something when you go to clock out. It specifically asks you, hey, was there an accident on site today, or are you okay today? And we're looking at ways of either integrating with other apps that already do that, or putting features like that into our own app. But I mean, we're still talking about the best way to put that thing in there. My personal opinion, to not kind of speak for the company, is I've seen a lot of these apps that are really more cover your ass than being helpful.
Exactly.
And nothing wrong with covering your ass, but I mean, if you're going to go ahead and put that stuff in there, I mean, I think it needs to be a little bit more managed and workflow and solutions oriented to make sure that, I mean, death in construction is huge. It really is. We see stats like that. We've had articles put out on our blog about stuff like that, and it's kind of frightening. So there's a real need there for people to pay attention, make sure that people stay safe when they're at work. And if we can find a way to do that and put it into the app that doesn't slow down work and everything, that would be great. But we're
Help them with their workman's comp rates.
Yeah, that as well.
Have you thought about other industries that have people on the move a lot? Like I was thinking about janitorial services or like facilities maintenance services that would have similar kind of need to track where people are, what job sites they're at.
Yeah, we categorize all of those as field service, so anybody who goes out, so that's plumbers, HVAC, things like that. We've also have, one of my favorites is private investigator firms. We've got a couple of those.
Yeah.
They use that because they have the same problem. They're driving around. But yeah, cleaning services, that's another one. Property management, all of those different industries we serve.
We have different labor rates for our employees depending on what type of jobs they're doing or where they're at. Does the app support that as far as clocking in on a service order compared to driving, compared to a prevailing wage job? There's different.
So the way that we have chosen to handle that is we don't do anything that has anything to do with money.
Yeah.
So we will track the job codes and we will track the tasks codes, and then we rely on the accounting system that the person uses. Again, QuickBooks is the best example. It pulls everything over and it maps it to the right place. So if your payroll system or your accounting system has all the correct pay rates in them, then it works out just fine. But we don't ever bring the money into our side.
Correct, but it does, you're able to, when you're clocking in, grab, I guess, a different job code,
Yes.
depending on what you're doing, where you're at.
Yeah, and on the onboarding process, we've helped enough people do this. We kind of have some suggestions for them to make things easier, one of them which is you alluded to, which is travel time. So we'll have them make a travel job. And some places actually do pay differently for travel than they do for actually being on site and working. And some people don't, so just for job costs and you're knowing what's going on in your business, we recommend people do stuff like that. But that's the features of it. Yeah, what job are you working on, then what task? Because those tasks can have different pay codes and things like that. So.
Can you talk about your business model and the specific profile of a client that might most lend itself to your tools? Small group, large group?
Sure. So we're a SaaS product. So we do $25 a month is the cost for it, plus $5 per employee that's active and tracking time. We started off historically because we minimum viable product and then start adding features as people ask for them. We focus primarily on small businesses. Over the last, I'd say 6 to 9 months, we're now into mid-market because we have the feature set to support their needs. And we're working towards enterprise. We expect to be there by the end of the year. We do have some enterprise clients, but they need to have really specific use cases that fit what our product does, because there's a few things that we just don't do that some of those enterprise clients need. But the roadmap over the next year is to get us there. So mid-market and small business is probably the best ones. And profile is anybody who has a workforce that needs to go somewhere, do a job, go somewhere else, do a job. Those are the people that work for us. So Cliff, the CEO, he was running a telecommunications construction company, so they were constantly dealing with having to go to places where there is no signal. So that is another feature that's built into the app. It'll keep everything local until you get back to signal, because when you're building the tower that's going to give signal to the area,
Right.
that's it.
Like
So anybody who goes somewhere to do the work. Yeah.
So in that same line, you just said people that were leaving, going and doing something. What about, let's say an example like a print shop and has 3 or 4 delivery drivers that are going out and doing those jobs where they're checking in, because there's different apps that are used for like delivery and that type of thing. But would that type of customer work with your app?
Possibly. If compensation and so from a job costing standpoint, it might be really handy.
Yeah.
But if you're predominantly in a car driving around, and that's the work that's being done, like in a delivery setting, you might actually be better off with a fleet tracking kind of a system, because you don't want continuous GPS. You're probably going to want to know routing information. And so just from a business intelligence standpoint, there might be a better solution for that. And then, because the other thing is if you're, you can do client, who am I delivering this for? But your task is kind of always the same thing.
Yeah.
Could it work? Yeah. Although of all of our competition that I'm thinking of, anything outside of fleet tracking, I couldn't think of a better company to send you to.
So a lot of companies are using a 1099, like an outside service to do that, because they're, that we have multiple clientele and we don't need, 7 drivers one day and 0 drivers the next and that type of thing. But I would think of like an outside. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, the closest thing to that, I guess, would be in construction, where you've got a bunch of subcontractors.
Yeah.
And sometimes, our clients will pay for the subcontractors to use the same service because it just streamlines billing so much.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't, because it's an additional cost, and they just rely on, the subcontractor to submit invoicing and hope that it's right, hope that the guys are actually there. And, that was another one of the funnest stories that we heard of, was the client actually came up and they're like, I got your last invoice, but I didn't see your guys here on any of those days. And they were able to go back and pull all the logs out of ClockShark and say, no, here's all the GPS locations. They were here, they were on site, they were doing what they were supposed to do. So, it's good for stuff like that as well. It can protect both sides if they use it right. Yes.
So, can you talk a little bit about how Cliff and Joe, right,
Yes.
are the brothers, right?
Our brothers.
So, how did they approach developing the team and the culture, and how do you guys, keep that together as you're growing?
So the nice thing, when Cliff and Joe first sat down, and maybe the right way to put this is when they got to a size where they found there is enough market for this product and this is going to go somewhere, it's at that point that they really sat down and they said, what kind of company do we want to have? So before employee number 1 was hired, they drafted this. This is the culture we want. This is how we're going to get it. This is what we value. And in this order, and every person who comes on board, they get these documents and it gets reviewed with them, and you sit down with the people in your department and Cliff or Joe, depending on what side of the business you're on. And they go over all this stuff to kind of let you know this is what we're looking for. And Cliff has some history in recruiting, and our first employee, Luke, who's in charge of sales and support, also used to come from recruiting. He worked in recruiting for years and years, so that's fortunate for us that they kind of know how to approach those things and try to identify as best as you can in that environment of interviewing and reading people's resumes and hoping it's accurate and truthful. Kind of what to look for and who's going to fit and who's not going to fit. But we were fortunate enough that they did that in the beginning. So really, it's just been maintaining it and then reviewing it every now and again. Do we have the proper incentive structures in place to make sure that this continues the way that we want it to, and we're not, incentivizing people to do things that are against the culture that we want to build. That stuff is constantly being reviewed. It's open discussion for everybody in the company. Is that anywhere near answer your question?
No, that's great. Yeah, it's for us in this community where we don't have a huge talent pool, we're trying to build it. Having that culture and keeping your human resources happy is important. So making sure So I was just curious how you guys dealt with it. Maybe I'll have Cliff come and do a little workshop, because we have some people that are struggling with this right now. They're at the point where they're hiring their first employee. How do you do this, and how do you maintain it?
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll let him know that, because they do a really good job with that, and I think he have a lot of interesting things to say.
You guys seem very focused on the product. It seems like there's a lot of distractions. Everyone in here almost gave more and more features. How do you guys stay so focused without being distracted?
As far as feature development and the roadmap,
Yeah.
we ask our customers. Every feature we've ever put into the app has been requested by the customers, and we have that part of our website where it's you can vote on any of the ideas that anybody else has submitted, but we also actually have that ported back into the website using some of the technology that we use for online chat and things like that. So if you were an administrator of an account, you log in, and we haven't communicated with you in 4 or 5 days because we try to not slam people with messaging every time. But it'll say, hey, here's a couple of things. Which of the 2 of these do you want? So we're actively out there all the time going, what do you want? What do you want? Cliff will pick up the phone and just start calling employees and ask them, what hurts, what's working well, what's not working well, all that kind of stuff. So we are very, very, very directed by the needs of the market that we serve.
Cool.
So are there other big competitors in this space? And kind of how have you differentiated from them?
There are loads and loads and loads of time tracking apps. Before I started working at ClockShark, this is not something that I really thought of all of that much, but once you get in there and you start looking around the market, and there's a new one every month, I swear. Everybody is trying to get into this. But yeah, there's a lot of them out there. So the biggest competitors that we have, there's 2 sides of it. There is a company called T-Sheets that was recently acquired by Intuit for, I think, $30 million. And they have a similar setup where it's a web interface and then multiple points of entry and things like that. But they're general purpose, so they're out there for anybody. If you work in an office, they have a feature set, or try to have a feature set for you. They're just really, really general purpose. So our biggest differentiation from them is that we've specifically focused on construction, field service, anybody who needs to go out and do work off-site. So we introduced features after getting to parity a few years ago, because it's always the first part. That's when it really started to diverge from the 2 of them. We were the first in the market to introduce geofencing as a notification trigger to let people know, hey, you're not at the job site anymore, you need to clock in, you need to clock out, keep things clean. The ability to share files back and forth, stuff like that. So from them, it was that. The other big competitor in the space is called Exact Time, and they were the biggest time tracking for construction for the longest time. And I mean, they're the guys that build the hardware. You walk into the construction site and have a key fob or punch your name in or something like that. But they didn't quite make the jump to digital fast enough, or faster than we could build our product from scratch. Maybe it's a good way to put it, because we've always been mobile app based, and nobody wants to buy more hardware when you've already got one of these sitting around in your pocket that everybody already has access to. So that's kind of how we started taking market share from them. They're still kind of big in enterprise, both because of legacy, a lot of people have their stuff, and second, because they do manufacture hardware. Some people still want that kind of thing. But those are the 2 big ones in our space. There's 1,000 other time tracking apps, but they have different places that we focus on. And we're even, I shouldn't say partnered with, but we know everybody in the space. And if somebody calls us up and they say, hey, this is my business and these are my needs and they're not a fit for us, we've got a list of people, hey, you need to call ClickTime because they're the people who have a product that's suited for you, because they're just going to churn out if they're not a good fit for us anyway. So we don't fight that battle. But hopefully that answered it. I think you were next.
Is there an exit strategy? So you want to get to a certain point and get bought out, or do you guys want to be privately owned and just grow and create?
That's probably a better question for Cliff or Joe to answer than for me, but unofficially based on, I think it's one of these, like what Saatchi and Saatchi said a long time ago, how big can we get before we start to suck? It might be one of those things. Now, there's not really a plan to sell it. Cliff and Joe really just said, we want to build a company that we would like working in, and so far they've done a good job. So as long as that persists, we've been avoiding external funding if we can help it, and so far we've been able to, and we don't see any need to do that in the future. We've been able to self-fund and want to keep it that way. So I don't think there really is one. Having said that, I think if somebody showed up with a dump truck full of money, the conversation would probably happen. So it goes.
Yeah, for employees that don't have phones, is there a way for them to say use somebody else's phone to check in?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So buddy punching is a problem, which is where, my friend calls me, he goes, hey, I'm 5 minutes away from the job site, you can clock me in anyway. So we have some security features built into the app that an employee who initially would download it, if they try to clock in, log out, log in as somebody else, clock in, it's going to disable the first guy's time punch. But we have administrative features that are all set by permissions in the web dashboard, and you can do it by department or by specific employee set, so that they can clock in. We call it crew clock, so you can come in and say, this is everybody on my crew, and I want to clock them all in at once, or I want to send them all to lunch at once. All of those different features, so that you could, if the phone dies, if they left the phone, if it fell in the plumbing, because that's what you're working on, you can still clock in and out.
Is there any value in the data that might be collected from this? It seems to me you're in a unique position to
Yeah.
identify trends, construction industry with the fires in the Santa Rosa area, the boom in construction. Is there any opportunities there?
I believe that there is. The data set required to do that is pretty big, and we're acquiring it, we're acquiring it quickly. We've also got some other partners that we talk to that do other things like material tracking or trying to follow projects all the way through from the beginning to the end. Of course, the government is constantly releasing information on housing starts and construction trends and things like that. I think there is something there. What to do with it, how to best utilize that as in a monetizable way, we don't have an answer to yet, but we are looking for that and trying to get better data collection on our end. If for no other reason than, if we can collect that kind of information and then feed it back to our own customers and say, hey, these are the things that we're seeing for customers who are more profitable in the same industry as you, or try to identify who are the rock stars, who are the outliers on the graph, and see if there's any information we could get from them that we could feed back in an educational format to our own customers to help them be more successful, would be handy as well. So we're kind of driving towards those aims, but where it's going to go yet, I don't know. Step one is it's better to be looking at it than looking for it. So it's a lot of data collection at this point, and making sure that we have enough granularity to be able to pull interesting information out at some point in the future.
Seems like it'd be real time.
Yeah, it could be. The challenge with that is trying to identify, people having different job codes and task codes, and even employee titles and things like that, and finding a way to try to figure out this person who's doing this work right now, who do they look like, what is their cohort, how would we identify that, and then how would we do comparisons in a meaningful way between them to look through their opportunities, things like that. But I think they're all solvable problems, and we're one of the companies between us and some of our other partners would have plenty of data to kind of do something with that. But nothing out there quite yet, just thinking about it.
And that's it, time's up.
Yay.
That was 20
Thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you very much.
That was awesome.